I don't know if I can take it anymore.
When you are depressed, you don't want to get
It
out of
seems
it.
so hard
You
today.
don't want to be bothered with anyone.
I don't have any
But
motivation.
overcoming depression is going to require that you get up and engage with life again.
All I want to do is sleep.
When you are feeling down, the worst thing you can do
The last thing
is
I want to do is
isolate
hang out
yourself,
with my friends.
because isolation actually intensifies sadness.
I don't think this will ever
So
go
I
away.
recommend finding a distraction that will shift your energy.
I wish somebody would just save me from this mental hell.
Okay.
So thank you for joining me on the Mental Hell podcast. This is your host, Barbie Moreno. And today I have with me Scott Graham, who we like to call the Swiss Army knife of all things. This guy's got to tell us about all kinds of different things. He's a psychotherapist and a counselor. He's an EMT. He has meditated for a ridiculous amount of time, slept on the streets, lost his husband in a car accident, dealt with grief. He's everything that we could possibly want on our podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
It is a privilege and a pleasure to be here, Barbie.
Thank you so much. So before we started recording, we were just kind of talking about all kinds of different things. And we kind of left off the subject of support animals, which is not normally where I was going to go with this conversation, but I do think it's an interesting thing. You said you started off not supporting the idea and kind of things have changed for you. Kind of give me an idea of what happened there.
Well, I a few years ago, I wrote a book about the legalization of marijuana and what a predicament the lack of public forethought was going to get us into. There's more information, literally, Barbie, on the back of an Oreo cookie container in the grocery store than there is on these edibles and everything that's out there. They just have not put any thought into it. And I drew this comparison and was very critical of emotional support animals and what a scam and racket it is.
Yeah.
I have a family member that literally she bought a vest for her dog so she could take her dog into public places, and the dog's not a support animal. She got someone to write a letter and was like, here it is.
Right.
And so I used that as an example of like poor forethought, because that's how we ended up with peacocks on the airplanes, right? And potbelly pigs running up and down the aisles of buses, and bringing snakes for support animals, and on and on and on. And so after Brian died, I got a lot of support from folks. And my dogs, I have two dogs, they were great supportive people. And as my understanding of mental health and mental wellness shifted around thinking, of what I wanted and what I needed and what I thought was helpful for me as a person experiencing grief and a person experiencing loss, I asked that for friends, and I had friends that basically gave me the middle finger.
Yeah. I mean, they'll give you so much support until they think you need to get over it, right?
Yeah, and the support, we'll talk about that. You're going to be blown away when I tell you how simple this was and how but so I ended up with not getting the support, more isolation, and my dogs became more and more of a big piece of support for me. And then I think it was last year, the American Psychiatric and Psychological Association voted on making, unprolonged, or it was crazy diagnosis about grief disorders, and how grief, if you had it for a period of time that they deemed was not healthy, then you were really messed up. So you should be medicated, and it's a psychological disease, and blah, 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 blah. And I wrote an article about what bullshit that was, because, grief's just like any other emotion that's out there. And so then I found myself caught. Like, here I was critical of this diagnosis, but at the same time, I was critical of emotional support animals. And at the same time, I've lost support. I needed the animals. And if I bought into their diagnosis, I could fit in a category that would allow me to have the support that I needed.
Right.
And so, I talked to somebody, they diagnosed me. I mean, it's like, "Oh, are you sad? Do you have difficulty sleeping at night?" Well, yeah, at times, I wake up, I think of, when my husband died as an EMT in Vermont, I I didn't I'll use the word weasel, but I asserted my way onto the accident scene,
Mm.
which no
How did he pass? In a car accident?
he was coming home from a Christmas party and the car caught on fire.
Oh, wow.
He
Just
was
caught
in
on
it.
fire like it just ignited?
It got stuck somehow, and then as he was trying to get out, the engine
Wow.
caught on fire,
Wow.
and the car was completely destroyed, absolutely completely destroyed. And so, um, this is, I really have a lot of what you're going to hear when I say this is really gratitude.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes people hear something like, "Oh, you're sad." It's not sadness. This is gratitude. And so, my, I knew that he'd gotten in this accident. And as a firefighter, I got onto the scene and I said, I didn't know that he had burned. I thought maybe he had gotten in an accident and froze to death. But when I called, I spoke to the investigator on the scene, and he said to me, he said, "I know you've seen things as an EMT and firefighter, but this is your husband, and
Mhm.
it's not the same." And I said, "Yeah, but I can handle it."
Yeah.
And then he said, "Yeah," but "let me check this out." So he checked it out, called me back and said, "All right, we'll let you come on, but we have to let you know the body's really badly burned."
Yeah.
Um, and
I'm sorry.
I got on the scene, and they were waiting because Vermont's a very small state in terms of population. And so the guy that was coming to investigate the fire was literally coming from like 3.5, 4 hours away.
Mm.
So you just have to wait for these people because there's not a lot of us that can do highly specialized things. And so they were still there. We got hours later when I came up, and I said, "Is the body still there?" And they're like, "Yeah, the body's still there." And I gave them some information and I said, I want to see the body. They were like, "No, you shouldn't say," really cautioning me. And a friend that was with me, a friend that I don't know, no longer have in the grief process, she was like, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. You can't unsee that." And I'm like, this is a person I spent 31 years with.
Mhm.
We had each other's backs all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to chicken out at the end. I'm going to be the husband
Mhm.
that he was in a relationship with,
Yeah.
for good, for bad, for greatness, for badness, for
Right.
sadness, for joy. I'm there to the end.
Right.
And they let me go on the scene, and I knew right away that there was, the car, you couldn't, he drove a green car. Everything was gone. The tires were gone.
Mm.
Everything was gone. Anything that was plastic, cushiony was all gone. It was just the metal framework of the car. And as I came around the corner, that his body was outside the car covered with a yellow tarp. And they said, "Can you identify the body?" And I said, I know this guy, I can identify him. And they said, "Okay." They pulled back the tarp, and he was facing towards the car
Mhm.
on his stomach, kind of in a military crawl. And so my heart just fell
Oh,
through, because
yeah.
I knew what that meant was that he didn't burn alive sitting in the driver's seat.
Right.
He got out, and this is where I have horrific dreams, because he got out of the car and somehow was trying to go away from the car, and somehow turned around and was going back towards, he was alive for that period of time,
Yeah.
which is just an excruciating amount of pain to go through. So I'm just overcome with compassion. I knew it was him. I could see his hand. He was wearing our wedding ring on his hand. I knew the back of his neck. We slept together.
Right.
And it was a crime scene, because they didn't know what the hell happened. And I said to the guy, I said, I need to touch him
Hmm.
just one last time. And the guy was like, no, you can't do that. I said, I'm touching him and
Mhm.
saying goodbye. And they didn't stop me. They just let me put my hand on his shoulder and tell him I love him.
Hmm.
And I'm so grateful that they allowed me to do that. And if I had to do it all over again, I would absolutely, unhesitatingly do that again.
Even though
Because
that's the memory now that you have of him?
absolutely,
That's hard, right? Yeah.
absolutely. Um,
Because you got to say goodbye.
because I got to say goodbye
Right. Yeah.
and they let me do that. And there's not many places where, I see these shootings on television and people that are badly hurt, and people were just divorced from that. They take them away and you may not even see them again.
Right.
Brian was cremated, so that was the last opportunity I had to touch him. It wouldn't have happened, I don't think, in any other state.
No, for sure not in
Um,
California. That's where
yeah,
I'm at. Yeah. No.
yeah. So that piece, you can see I still have that with me,
Yeah.
right? It's
But it
there.
also brings a lot of emotion to you too. And like you said, that's gratitude, right? But I would imagine some of that is still grief.
Yes, yeah, it's a mix.
Yeah.
It's a mix.
And so technically, according to what you were saying, the government says you're grieving too long.
Yes, absolutely. I should
Isn't
not be
that
doing
crazy?
this
Yeah.
years
Isn't that
later.
crazy? Could
It's
you
crazy.
imagine putting a timeline on somebody's grief? You lost your partner and your husband, 31 years of a relationship, and you should just be over it. Otherwise, we're going to medicate you.
Right, right. I can't imagine these people in school shootings that have lost their, 5-year-old, 4-year-old, 6-year-old kid
No,
that just they should have that with them for the rest of their life.
absolutely. I would
Right,
imagine that you're a sociopath if you don't.
right,
Yes. I mean, I
right,
can't. I mean, obviously, as days go by, it gets further and further away. But if this is the person that you've been with for that long, you wake up and they're not next to you. Every day you wake up and they're not next to you. How does that go away?
it goes away with my dog now, who is,
Yes. So that's what
I
we were
have to
talking
tell
about.
you, I have a big black lab, and she somehow knows when I'm having a difficult time, and I'll go to bed and I'll wake up and she's like right next. I mean, it's a king size bed that Brian and I had with these dogs. They slept on the bed with us, and they are just right there with me.
It's interesting how animals can be so much more compassionate and loving than humans.
I can't tell you, I wrote a chapter in my book, and all I said was, if you want to know what you need to do to support somebody who's having a hard time, whether it's anxiety or grief or depression, doesn't matter. Just ask yourself, what would a dog do?
Right.
And do that.
Yeah.
That's if that's it, right? I mean, support, not judging, not expecting, not criticizing, not trying to fix.
Just be there.
Just be there.
Yeah.
Just
Be there without condition and without criticism and without even thought, right? Because they're there
right,
without thought. They're just
right.
there.
And that actually is one of the things that is key in meditation practice.
Right. So this is the meditator of 291 days. Was that what it was?
Yeah, lots of days, 10,
Yes.
10, 12 at a time.
Yeah.
But and the key piece of that is to, for most folks, for me, I'll say for me, and you listeners, watchers, viewers, thinkers can say, is that me too? I'm not going to say this is how it is for everybody. But for me, when I first started meditating, my mind was like, I was thinking about what I was going to buy, what I was going to do, what I needed to do to fix the house, sex, this, memories, that, all over the place. Mine was going on all kinds of things.
And how long ago was this before you go on? How long ago
This-
did you start this meditation process?
This was like in 1996.
Okay, so this is before it was even like, popular to do.
Yes, right,
Yes.
right. And the popular meditation that today is not really meditation.
Right. I did
I hate
read
to
you
break
saying
that to
that
you
as well.
listeners. That's
Yes.
not what meditation is. That's like, taking classical music and putting that, a disco beat to it and saying, that's not classical music. Anyway, so you go in, there's no talking, no interaction. You're, quiet, you're meditating, there's no writing, there's no music, there's no nothing.
Right.
And the reason for that is because we fill our minds with all this stuff all the time. And so what happens is over time, literally over the first 3 days, you have less and less stuff to fuel your mind.
Mhm.
So your mind gets quieter and quieter and quieter because you're not talking about stuff, you're not reading the news, you're not listening to music, you're not reading a book, you're not watching TV, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And then you just work on kind of being in the present and accepting things as they are. In fact, one of the things, there's a Pali term that, and this actually is a core piece that I think for folks that struggle with mental issues,
Mhm.
and that can be anything from I need to be the captain of my family to I need to be the president of the nation to I'm the worst person on the planet. It doesn't matter what it is,
Right.
as everybody struggles with some sort of demon
Yes.
in it. The key piece from that, the key word that I remember so clear from that meditation practice is yatha bhuta, which translates into as it is,
Mhm.
not as you would like it to be.
It is as it
We
is.
really get grasping around as we would like it to be, or
Mhm.
not to be, or
Mhm.
any of those other things.
Mhm.
Life would be better if my husband changed a little bit, or if the dog didn't do this, or if we had a different president, or if they passed this law, or this happened, or if it was warmer or colder, or this or that. And to just accept things as they are really is, it's very freeing with me around grief. So instead of me coming up, I'm being such a hog, I should shut up and ask.
Oh no, I love it. I just want to hear the saying again so that it can, like, if you can pronounce it, so we can say it again.
Yatha bhuta.
Tabuta. And did this just pop into your brain, or did you know this saying before you went into meditation?
No. It's one of the things they do on the meditation retreats is, and the ones that I've been on, is that every night there's like a mini lecture.
Mhm.
And it's crazy creepy. Now, and then this is why I think it's crazy creepy. Not anything about meditation. Every night they have a video lecture, a videotape lecture. And anywhere you go in the world to do any of these meditation retreats that I've been on, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people have done these 10-day retreats. And the videotape lecture they show on day one in 1996 is the same videotape lecture they're going to show on day one in 2023. Exactly the same.
Is it still on video?
And it went from video to CDs, I mean, to
Right, okay.
DVDs, and now it's MP3,
So at least they've updated that.
Now it's all digital, but it's the same exact person, same exact video.
Right.
And he basically debriefs the day and says, this is what you've learned, and you experienced this today. And this happened. And this afternoon, when this happened, it's creepily spot on. Like creepily
because it's a process that everybody goes through.
It's this process that it's just such a normal process, right? Like, on the day, you start off by watching your breath, and on the end of the second day, he does a lecture that says, see, you thought meditation was about being high on the cloud, and now you've come here and you probably want to leave.
Right.
I'm like, how does he know I want to leave? And the third day, he says, you came here and we said focus on your breath, and you came here to focus on your breath, and what you ended up focusing on was your mind.
Yeah.
And you learned how you take 2 breaths and your mind go, what is this mind? I thought I was in control of my mind. And you're like, that's exactly what was happening to me this afternoon. And so it's so ironed out, I guess you would say. And so this concept of as it is, yata bhuta, comes up around day 7 on that piece. And I had never heard it before that. And I remember sitting down there, and because you get in this piece of where you're trying to meditate and you're uncomfortable and you want to.
The
And
body
so,
physically hurts.
yes.
Yes.
And you're like, I just want to shift. I want to do this. I don't want to do that. And then there's some glimmers in your meditation where instead of your mind bitching and moaning about, because we all have pain,
Yes.
right? And it's just throbbing or warmness or this or that. I mean, as an EMT, that's how we define it. Is there throbbing? Is it tingling? Where does it stop? Where does it start? All this other stuff. But when we have that pain, we multiply it because we're like, it's never going to end. It's going to, my arm is killing me. I'm going to die. It's horrible.
Our mental hell, right? What we do to ourselves.
And we do the same instead of, I have a friend who's struggling with, he's got voices in his head, he tells me. And I texted him today and I said, they're just voices in your head.
Yeah, we all have them.
We all have that. I said, I got voices in my head. I said, I would be, I said, your voices are saying something different, but you're buying into those voices.
Yes. Yeah.
And I said, you don't have to let them rule you. If so, it's this piece of accepting things as they are, not as you want them to shift and be. It's really powerful.
It's 2 things on that. First, I have learned in my life and kind of what I've seen through my journeys is that generally when somebody turns to retreats and meditation and finding mindfulness and conscious living and presence and all of those different things, there's a reason. Something happened, they got burnt out in life, they were just tired of something traumatic happened. What happened to you that made you feel like this is where you wanted to go? Because it doesn't just go we don't wake up one day and go, I've decided I want to meditate. Most people say, I've decided I'm going to take a shower, but meditating is not one of the things we go and wake up for, right? So what happened? So
you go in that course. For most folks, the piece that you're saying, when you're already, it's already loaded because you're looking for something, which is why you signed up.
Right. Do you know what you were looking for?
I actually was not looking for anything. One of the things that happens a lot is that people who do a course like myself come out and talk to other folks about the course, and they're like, you should do this. You should check that out. And so I had a friend, a colleague, Jack, who was 45 years clean and sober. And he was like, you should do this. And I'm like, yeah, you're a crackpot. I'm not, there's no way I'm going someplace where I can't talk to somebody for 10 days and I have to do this and this and that. I'm not going. He's like, really, you should go. And, I'm like, no. And then, he went on another retreat and he came back. He's like, it was really great. I'm like, well, what'd you do? He's like, you should go. I'm like, no, I'm not. And finally, I went. I'm so grateful to him for doing that. And that happens a lot. Somebody goes on a meditation course or in this specific tradition, people go on this and then they, tell their friends and then other folks check it out to go. And I get that, but I still feel like, in my opinion, to be introduced to it and actually want to go on the journey, you're lacking or wanting something, right? Because if nothing needed to be fixed, why would you go? Well, it's not human nature to say, I want to go and meditate if I feel like everything is right. If everything is as it is, then there's no reason to go searching for anything else. Yeah, I guess for me in my little pocket knife, Swiss Army knife piece, I've always been a searcher. I mean, I
Mm,
hike the Appalachian Trail,
right. You just
right?
like growth and
And so
self-development.
I'm a growth seeker.
Hmm.
I'm a
Yeah.
growth seeker. And so I was an outward bound instructor for
Mhm.
many, many years. Right. And that's all about people stepping off of zip lines and rappelling down cliffs and finding out their comfort zones. And so this to me felt like it was another piece to check out and explore and grow.
Yeah.
Um,
And I believe it's honestly an amazing, I would tell everybody that they need to sit and learn about themselves and to expect it to be excruciatingly painful at some point. If it's not excruciating painful, I don't think you're doing it right. And when I say painful, it's because as humans, we resist what's going on, right? So that's where I feel like the physical pain comes from, is that we're just sitting there and now there's nothing to bitch about in our mind. So our body's like, oh, let me make something for you to bitch about in your mind, right?
I think you're probably right. Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I wanted to say that, but I didn't want to come across as like a cult recruiter kind of
Oh,
guy.
no, no, no.
And so you're not
You
recruiting for a cult. So that's,
no,
um,
I am not. And be free to talk about whatever it is you want to say. Cause I mean, that's the point. If we censor what we talk about, what's the point in having the podcast?
yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about this place that I went to that also breeds suspicion is that they don't charge for any of the courses that go on there.
That's interesting.
They're free. They're free, completely free. And what they do is at the end of the course, if you and so they only you are only there on the goodness of other students. So at
Mhm.
the end of the course, you can give money,
Right.
whatever you want to give. That they don't tell you. They don't say, well, it's $100 a day or it's $200. They don't any of that stuff. They're like, yeah, this is this, and people are like, well, tell us. They're like, nope, give what you want.
Mhm.
And what you're giving is for a future person.
Right.
You're not paying for your course.
Right.
You are paying it forward for somebody else.
Which is such a beautiful idea.
Yeah. And they tell you, we think it's great that you want to give money, but if you really want to
Give
do
your
stuff,
time.
give your time.
Yeah.
Come
Because
here.
it's more valuable than money.
Yeah. And they say, come here and spend 10 days
Mhm.
and actually help make food, clean the floors, make everyththing that's there. Nobody gets paid at these places. Everybody that's there is doing it for free for you. And away you go.
Could you imagine if the world was like that? It would be so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. And they say, people are like, oh, I don't know. They're like, look, and this just makes sense. This is what you were just saying. If I write a check for something like for a future student, I get that good feeling and that good benefit in that moment when I write that check.
Right.
But if I'm there for 10 days,
Mhm.
every second of every minute when I'm carrying food out, when I'm cleaning a toilet, when I'm, helping somebody who's left their toothbrush at home and needed a toothbrush, all of those, I'm getting that check thing
Mhm.
in all those pieces.
Mhm. And you're
Uh,
getting the experience and you're building a community and you're
yeah,
living, to be honest,
yeah,
you're living.
absolutely.
That's what living is, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read something somewhere and it said, you don't pay for things with money, you pay for things with time.
Right.
Because, right, you give your time to get the money. So you're paying for things with time. So really the way that they're running things is with bartering your time for experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a nice way to look at it.
And I feel like if people would do that more, then we wouldn't care so much about the physical stuff.
The best part of my life, the best part of my week this is a Tuesday. Best part of my week is every Tuesday morning, I go and I teach Tai Chi outside to the elderly.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is Vermont.
Mhm.
This is Vermont. These old folks, I know if you're watching this, I know you're going to be like,
Who you called it an old folk?
Right. I had there's one person, it was like raining. Like we meet outside. We meet outside. These people are in their 70s and 80s, and we meet outside in Vermont.
Mhm.
And in the wintertime, we meet out in a park doing Tai Chi, which is, you're stomping your feet around for this. They show up with shovels and shovel the park down to the grass so they can move around. And this one person, she's just I told her today, I said, you're just an amazing woman. Because it was rainy. I was chilly. I was like, are we going to stop? She's like, no, I'm here. And I said, okay. And I said, are you sure? And she looked at me and said, what, do I look like I made of sugar? I guess not. I guess we're doing it in the rain. And so we have been there. It has been like 6 degrees below zero.
Yeah.
And we are out there bundled up doing Tai Chi.
Isn't it interesting though? You can do it.
It's the
best. Your physical body can actually do it. It's our mind that tells us it's too cold.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the best part of my week.
Yeah.
And I do that completely free.
Yeah.
It's the best part of my life to go there and spend an hour work. Now everybody knows the form very, very well. So I'm just giving little tweaks in here and this and that on this. And it's a really complicated Tai Chi form that we do. And, we're out there doing this every Tuesday and people are practicing. It's so inspiring. The absolute best part of my life are the things I do I'm an EMT. I'm an EMT instructor and I do that for free.
Yeah. Volunteer.
And it's the best part of my life.
It feels like it's actually the things that we decide to do for what we call our livelihood, which is more of buying just more and more crap, right? Do you know George Carlin, I would imagine, right? Did you ever see any of his stand-up? And he says, like, especially in America, but in general, we work so that we can buy more crap. And then we need a bigger house for all of our crap. And then we buy more crap. And then we need a bigger house for all of that crap. And then we have too much crap and we stick it in storage and nobody can touch our crap. But, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it's funny because it's funny and it's sad because it's true. And yet, if you just take the time like you're doing on Tuesdays and spend it with some old folks doing some Tai Chi, you probably have a lovelier life than those that are sitting on a yacht.
And as I'm a coach and I work with a lot of folks who make a lot of money. And that's completely true.
Mm-hmm.
That's completely true because they think that the solution to life is, a bigger plane, a faster car, and that's not the solution to life at all.
No. In fact, everybody has whatever you have, somebody has more. So you'll never have it all. And I was reading this other book and it was about the fact that even the wealthiest people in the world have money stress because they too feel like they don't have enough.
Right.
And they've got so much more than everybody else.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
It's this mental thing of just constantly needing more.
Right.
And how do you get out of that?
And here's another great resource for you or your listeners. Write this down, make a little note. There is a BBC series from 2010, I think. It's called Century of the Self.
Okay.
Century of the Self. It's like 4 hours long. It will scare the crap out of you because it talks about the start of marketing and the influences of Sigmund Freud and how Americans took all this stuff to figure out that people needed to somehow, there was a time where people just wore brown clothes.
Right. Now we need colors.
Do you realize there was a time where people wore brown, everybody wore brown clothes. And now it's like, well, you have to look this way or I have to have this thing. That's my identity and on and on and on it goes. This color, that color, that all came out of this initial research and stuff. Women smoking cigarettes and on and on. It was just all created to sell more junk.
It's more junk
to get. Really, it's a great 4-hour series. It's not preachy, but it is very factual. It's put on by the BBC. You can YouTube it. You look,
Yes.
Google YouTube, Century of the Self.
I will, and I'll do a blog on it. I can already tell that I would be aligned with a lot of the stuff that it says, because I don't know, I just feel like, okay, so I have 2 children. I have a 15-year-old and one that's going to be 9 in a week and a half. And the world that they live in, and I know every generation before that kind of said the same thing, but for me, the world that they live in, it's so sad. Everything is materialistic. Everything is about being the best of the best. Everything is about what are you going to do next? And it's like, what about what are they doing now? Who gives a shit about tomorrow? They may not be here tomorrow. What about now? It's like they keep prepping them for the future. And it really upsets me, because I have a daughter who's in water polo and she does a really great job. But when they're in off season, they still practice 3 times a week, but the coach wants them to go sign up for something else on top of that. And I'm like, she's in high school. She's a human. What more does she need to do? Give the kids a break. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And then they wonder why they're shooting up schools and killing themselves.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
pressure's
There's
outrageous.
such an incredible, and all of this stuff's magnified by an artificial world.
Exactly.
That we see through the lenses of our cell phones.
Yep. And sadly, older people, generally men, will kill themselves if they lose their job, because that's their complete identity. And if they don't have that job, they have failed as a human. And that's horrible. Horrible. That's what they feel is their only value to life, is that job.
Yeah.
That job is the only, and the people that they leave behind. I would imagine seeing your husband and that being the end for you, or your physical relationship, right? Because I'm sure you still have a connection with him. But seeing something like that has to somewhere awaken something inside of you, that all of this crap that they try to sell us has no value.
No, it's fleeting. It's fleeting.
It's fleeting.
And actually on the meditation retreat, they talk about this one day. He's like, yeah, we think that the solution is this thing, I'll get this dishwasher and I'll get that thing and that thing, and on it goes and on it goes. And, and I remember this piece. He's like, the sky's the limit. And then he's like, no, not even the sky's the limit.
Right. Let's go to the moon
now. Go to the moon. Right. And you can, there's people that are like, I want to be the first person that flies out in the whatever thing that is, Tesla's doing, or Richard Branson's, and whatever it is. It's like, I want to be on the orbiter. Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to that tabuta. It is as it is. Enough is enough. Yeah. Enough is enough. Everything you have. I mean, unless you're in a circumstance where you're a child who has no means of getting out of something or something like that, everything you have is there to support you, and you don't need a significant amount more, and I mean, I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and say like, I don't live in poverty in any way, shape, or form. You know what I mean? I have things, and I wouldn't want to be without my things because they create comfort, but they're not my identity.
Right. And the research interesting around that has shown that when you get a thing, or when, that above, once we have our basic needs met, right? We're not hungry. We're doing this. When you get something, like you may get a raise at work, or you make something, or you get a new TV, or you get the new car, it feels, you get this, you are elated a little bit but then that goes back down.
Right. And so now you need something else to bring you to that point. Yeah.
To get that piece. And it is not lasting.
Yeah.
It is not lasting.
It's like you need on social media, they need one more like or one more heart. Like, it's not enough that you have 20 million people following you. You need one more,
Right.
It's like, when is enough? Yeah.
Somebody said to me a couple weeks ago, I said, because they were like, are you sure? They were like, I'm like, are you sure? Like I was having this conversation with a client, and he's like, are you sure? I says, I'm reasonably sure. And the evidence that I would hold out is that if having things and having everything meant you'd have happiness, you would not see movie stars killing themselves.
Right.
Michael Jackson would not have killed himself.
Right.
And, you know, and I
Wouldn't
know
see him
you're gonna say it was
drugged
an overdose, but, you know, I mean, wouldn't have
Right.
gone down that path. You
Exactly.
wouldn't see some beautiful models jumping out of balconies
Mhm.
because they weren't beautiful enough.
Or on major drugs that they're just
Yeah.
numbing themselves. They're just,
Right.
so now they have the money to numb themselves and in a life that everybody thinks that they want. But if
Right.
they're numbing themselves, I got to tell you, that's probably not the life you want.
Yeah. We see the life that people want us to, you know, on Facebook, you see one of two things.
Yeah.
You either see people telling you how great their life is,
Right.
or they're fishing for sympathy in some way.
Yes. Yes.
No one loves me.
Yes.
And then they get like 400 people that say,
oh, I love you.
I'm sending you a hug.
You know, what's interesting about that, because I have become aware of that only recently, to be honest. I was always that person who's like, oh no, I'll make sure they know that they're loved, you know? And then I started seeing what a manipulation that is. And I just kind of like, I'm like, nah, we're good. Like you got 200 people saying they love you and you probably still aren't happy. So my one little saying's not enough.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm
I don't
sending you
know.
love and light.
I'm sending you London light. Yeah.
Do
Let
you
me
feel
fix
better
it.
now? Yeah. Thanks a lot. That's what I
Yeah.
need.
So, you know, in this podcast, I do talk a lot about mental health and I call it mental health. And it's not always mental illness. It's literally just the crap we talk about in our head that tells us we need
It
more.
is.
We're not good enough. You know, we're not thin enough. We're not beautiful enough. If you look at the average person's literally average. Like, like they want to look like all these people. And it's like the reason why those people are like, you know, on TV and stuff is because they're not the average person. You can't make yourself into these other people.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It is worse. It is the most worst piece in the gay community, in my opinion.
I would love to hear about that.
And that was actually another one of my books. I wrote a book about androphile, because what happens for a lot of folks is they come out of the closet.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I cannot speak if this happens with transgender community or other pieces. I can say this is what happens with gay men. You come out of the closet and you get this community that welcomes you, and then you learn from this community what it means to be a good gay man.
And what is a good gay man?
This is what you're told. This is
Right.
what you're
No, I
told.
know. Yeah.
That you have this kind of body.
Mhm.
You do this kind of sex, you wear this kind of underwear. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Mhm.
You drink this kind of vodka, you
Mhm.
believe in these political beliefs.
Wow.
If you're, you know, if you're I wrote about this in my book. If you are a gay man that says, wait a minute, you know, I'm not sure I believe that, you know, that abortion should be legal like it is on it, then you're like, oh, you've got issues. In
Right.
fact, one of the things that is put out, see, this is why I hate like the American Psychological Association and these diagnostic people,
Just
because
stupid
not
people
only,
making up stuff.
yeah, because not only, I mean, literally, you know, they made grief a disease in one swell voting swoop, and they cured all gay men in 1973 in one big voting swoop. It was in the manual, and then it was not in the manual because they said it's not a mental illness anymore. Well, how can that fucking be?
Right. Yeah.
Right, but
people don't understand that these people who are supposedly experts are just people who have opinions.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, they're sitting around with napkins in a bar coming up with ideas and to diagnose things. And so, you know, one of the things that has been put out there around internalized homophobia, because that's what gay men get labeled with, right? Like, well, you know, he has internalized homophobia, right? That's why he's acting this way. You know, people look at, you know, George, what's his name, who's, you know, the gay Republican in Congress, and they're like, oh, he's got internalized homophobia. He isn't really accepted, and blah, 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 blah. And try to make him be less of a person you know, than who he really is. And one of the diagnostic criteria in one of the assessment tools for internalized homophobia is, are you ready for this? Talk about George Orwell. You are critical of leaders and the direction of the LGBTQRSTUV community.
You're critical of them, and that's internalized homophobia.
Yeah, because you're somehow projecting that piece out because you're not it's crazy. It's
because
a way
you have your own
control
opinion.
people.
Yeah, it's because you have your own opinion. You are in whatever that you just said about homophobia, internalized homophobia.
Yeah. Internalized itself. It's like people who are homophobic are people that, hate gay people.
Right.
Right.
And that's,
And so they're saying that you have somehow taken this external view of people that hate gay people, and you're putting it on yourself. And that's why you're not in line with the party and what they're telling you to do. Isn't that crazy?
I think it's crazy that people have so many opinions that they think other people need to fall in line with. That's what I think is crazy. I think it's about everything. I look at, and this is opinion, right? So this is my opinion of this, but I look at, some people I've known for a very long time, and they've become very hateful over things that I've never would have assumed that they were going to be. And I just don't understand where the hate comes from. Why anybody has to do what anybody else thinks is the way it should be done. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of it comes back to our cell phones.
Of course.
Because what's I'll tell you what's really creepy. I did my second edition of this book, Come As You Are, about grief, and I wrote a chapter in this book about the emotional support animals, psychiatric support animals. And before I wrote that chapter, I did a blog post. And this was within the last 6 months I published the book and did this stuff. My news feed, how did they find this out? My news feed is filling up with things about emotional support animals and psychiatric support dogs. Yes. So that just then gives me this more myopic view of the world. Right. Because and that's the news feed that I'm getting from Google. Right. Because they want me to go read the thing about the dog thing because they think I'm interested in that. Right. And then I'm going to look at the advertisements and buy shit. Yeah. For my house that I don't need. Well, and you can have an opinion of anything, and you can find it online, and you can find 20 different things that support it and 20 different things that tell it it's wrong. You can go down that rabbit hole all day long if you want to go down it. Yeah. But my point is that our perceptions of the world get shaped by this. I assume that I'm just getting this feed of information, of news, but it's somehow being shaped around my own views, which then fills me with more angst, more agitation, more, Yeah. And then makes you feel like you're right. Exactly. Yeah. We become siloed. Exactly. We become siloed. Yeah. And it goes back to that whole idea of, I always think about like community. If it's not right for a community, how can it be right in general, right? Like, so meaning that when I say that, like, I look at everything with compassion is what I try to do. I'm human. I don't always, right? But if I don't necessarily agree, if I see somebody, let's say I see somebody on the street who's completely drugged out and talking to themselves, this is not what I want my children to be. This is not what I want to be. However, I have no idea what happened to that person. Right. You're absolutely right. I have no idea. And so it hurts me to hear people say, oh, they're just a homeless druggie on the street. And I'm like, we have no idea how they got there. We have no idea what situation they're in. And there's not enough support to help them get out for the most part. I mean, these are all just, again, my opinions, but I just feel like there's, like you said, things are just geared towards reiterating your own thoughts instead of stepping outside of them and looking at things from places of compassion or a different point of view or whatever. And it makes people angry, and it makes people feel like they're right. And all it is people don't get it. Like you said, it's so that they click on the advertisement. Right. And it's fueled by this piece of me, mine, and I. Mm-hmm. I'm right. My way's best. Everything's about the way that I see it, just reinforces this myth of I. And it's interesting because earlier we were talking about my friend who's actually a trained counselor and psychotherapist, who is no longer my friend. And I said, you're going to be blown away by this piece of what she refused to do. And this actually is a great thing to do for anything you're struggling with. And all it is asking questions and talking in a way so that the person doesn't define with themselves wrapped up with whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So for me and grief, the piece to ask is, are you ready? This is it. This is why she said, I can't do this anymore. How's your grief? That's it. That's how's your grief. So so what you're doing when you ask that question, and you can do the same thing. If your kid is struggling with depression or anxiety, you just say, how's your anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be even more skillful, drop the word your and replace it with the word the.
How's the anxiety?
So it's even more distant. So you say, how's the anxiety? What happens is that the person doesn't talk about their drama. The person doesn't talk about their story. They talk about how they are responding and interacting with this phenomenon.
Interesting. It's kind of like, it's like taking it from me, mine, like that, like you said, the ownership, right? And looking at it from a little bit of an outside perspective.
Right. And how I discovered this quite accidentally was I have had 2 total knee replacements in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And people have no trouble coming up to me and saying, how's the knees? Yeah, easy, right? I might be going and they'll see me go, and they'll be like, how's the knees? Bothered you these? I'm like, and my response isn't about, oh, I really miss my knees, oh, the operation, oh, this or that. I'm like, yeah, it was bothering me this morning, or it hasn't bothered me in a couple of days, but the weather might be changing, or this leg's clicking. I can hear this clicking noise when I'm going on, and it's strange. And it's this meta conversation about the thing, as opposed to, somebody coming up to me and saying, are you thinking a lot about Brian? How are things going? Tell you, right. All this other stuff, which then brings up the story. This just is, how's your grief these days?
Yeah. Or how's the grief?
How's the grief?
Right.
I
love that.
And the same thing. I mean, just imagine if instead of coming up to somebody and saying, what are you depressed about today?
Right.
Are you getting out of bed? Why is this not, blah, blah. We says, how's the depression treating you?
They're like, shit.
How is that? Because suddenly it shifts, right? Because it's not, I'm depressed.
Right. It's the depression.
The depression. It is.
I have to play with this.
Right. How's the anger? How's the anger these days? Right. It's like, how's the knees? Right. That is such an epiphany.
I'm going to play with this.
It does. I mean, it's just shifts. It's that piece where, remember I say you got these sensations on your wrist or wherever of like, it's warm, it's tingly and this, and then we build a story about it. My arm's going to fall off. I'm never going to be able to use it. It's, I'm dying here. There's so much pain. And it just magnifies it. If you say, how's the depression today? If you recognize that it's like clouds in the sky, it is as it is, not as you would like it to be.
Right. Or as you feel it to be, or
exactly.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling that I never stumbled onto it. And it's mind-boggling how my knees relate back to the meditation practice that I did in 1996 and Yata Bhuta and all these other pieces, unless I'm just really gifted at malarkey.
I love that word. So why do you not have that friend? I mean, I don't understand, even if they don't agree with this concept, unless you're very much about this is the way it is and you got to go along with it. Like, what happened to your friendship there? You said there's not there anymore.
It's just not there. She wouldn't go there. And I was like, this is an important piece for me And so we got further and further apart. It's
Mm.
be the equivalent of somebody coming up to me and saying, well, you know what? It's great that you're gay, but I don't want to hear any conversations about men you're dating.
Oh, yeah.
Or, I don't want it. And I'd be
I'm
like,
not interested. Yeah.
right. And then, I bring that piece, it's like, well, you never ask me about guys I'm dating, or am I, doing here? You never ask me about any of that stuff. Yeah, I don't want to go there.
It's a conditional relationship at that point.
Right. That, yes.
Yeah.
And it's really the other piece is that I'm being gay is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't want to edit my life out for you. Right. It's like, so you see these kids that are with their parents that have to, these people that have two lives, they edit their life out.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
I don't want to edit my life out for people. And so, and that includes grief. And if somebody's struggling with depression or anxiety or any other, it doesn't matter what is going on. You shouldn't edit your life out for other people.
No, but I do like the idea of removing it from the person and making it something to look at from a distance.
Yeah.
I mean, that's beautiful, honestly. Like I'm literally, when I say I'm going to play with this is I'm going to try to remember when I talk to people to ask a question in a way that it depersonalizes it. And I bet you it will help them through it. I can't imagine that it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Right. If you
it'll be interesting for you to hear what their response is.
Right.
Like if you came up and says, it'd be like, someone saying, how's the car doing? Right. Oh yeah. How's the knocking on the engine doing? It's like, well, it's there when I started up, but then it's fine in the afternoon. They're just talking about it in a meta way. They're not even wrapped up in their car and places they've traveled to. Nothing is there.
But if you went to them and you said, how's that old clunker that's always breaking down on you doing? They're gonna be like, oh my gosh, it's such a pain. Da, 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 da.
Then you get in the story. Are you ever going to get it fixed? Why don't you ever take care of that windshield wiper? Blah, 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 blah.
Okay, I'm going to play with this and we're going to have to do a follow-up.
Okay.
And I'm going to watch that BBC
Century of the Self.
Yep, Century of the Self. How's the blank? Yeah. And Tabuta. I'm going to start trying to.
Tabuta. You spell it Yathabhuta.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I just put Taboota.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. I was only spelling it in case somebody wanted to look it up. Who was
there you go. I was just being phonetic about it.
Okay, what was that word? It's like Yathabhuta or something like that. If you want to look it up and really see what it means or read something about it, because there's things that are written about it too. It's been around for millennia.
So tell me, somebody wants to, they love you. They're like, Scott's my new guru. Let me follow him. How do we find you? Obviously, I'm being facetious, but yes.
I'm a girl. Scott's my new Swiss Army knife. That's
yes, exactly.
A great piece. You can just Google G. Scott Graham. Easy. There's all places. I'm on Facebook, G. Scott Graham. If you do G. Scott Graham author, you can see all my books.
Well, I love your enthusiasm for life.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that's a gift. It's a gift to those who allow it to be a gift, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm.